If you've just finished the second season of House of the Dragon, you may know it is loosely based on the Anarchy, a civil war that occurred in England between Empress Matilda, daughter of King Henry I of England, and her cousin, Stephen of Blois. You may also know that the Empress title comes from Matilda's marriage to Emperor Henry V of the Holy Roman Empire. Though it was highly unlikely, the possibility of the English and imperial thrones being united is one that fascinates me. So in honor of that and the show, this video will explore the question, what if Matilda had united the HRE and England? Disclaimer, this scenario is very unlikely considering cultural, political and gender relations of the time, so instead of having one major event which leads to a divergence from our timeline, I've taken the liberty of changing a few things. Matilda was born in 1102, and quickly followed by her brother, William, who became heir to the English throne. When she was 7, the then King of Germany, Henry V, sent a proposal for marriage which was accepted. While this was going on, the HRE was embroiled in the investiture controversy, a dispute between the Emperor and the Pope about who could choose bishops and if the Emperor could even choose the Pope. In 1111, Henry kidnapped Pope Pascal, forcing him to concede the right of investiture and crown Henry as Emperor. When the news of this agreement was read to the Roman crowds, riots immediately broke out. Henry's merciless treatment of Rome and its cardinals forces Pascal to agree to the Concordat of Sutri and crown both Henry and Matilda as Emperor and Empress of the HRE. On the way back from Rome, Henry visited the lands of the Countess Matilda of Tuscany. In exchange for more land and Henry being named her heir, Matilda was named Vice Queen of Italy. Matilda of England sees this precedent at a young age and is inspired by this namesake of hers, a woman holding power over vast swathes of the empire. She began taking an active role in the imperial government by 14, which earned her the respect of her subjects, who called her the Good Matilda. When the Countess passed away a few years later, Henry named Matilda his new Vice Queen of Italy before marching back to Germany to put down rebellions. Meanwhile, Matilda would rule Henry's new Italian holdings while keeping the papacy in check, no small feat for a 16-year-old girl in a foreign land. Pope Pascal passes away, and Matilda demonstrates her political deafness by having Maurice, the Archbishop of Braga and an ally of Henry, elected as Pope Gregory VIII. Though this is a controversial decision considering the ongoing rebellion, news that Matilda is pregnant is seen as a sign of divine support. A boy is born in 1119, named Henry after his father and grandfather. To cement imperial control over Italy and honor his newborn son, Emperor Henry names him Duke of Tuscany, consolidating the lands of the late Countess. In 1120, the English King Henry prepares to sail across the Channel with a large host of nobles, which includes his son and heir, William. While the king took his own ship, William and 300 others, all heavily drunk, would take the White Ship. Newly refitted, its captain's father had been the captain of William the Conqueror's ship, and now he drunkenly boasted that his ship was even faster. Some left the White Ship before it sailed, either worried about the excessive drinking or because they themselves had had too much. Stephen of Blois and his older brother Theobald disembarked in our timeline, but in this one, they had a few glasses of wine too many, and overconfident, they stepped onto the ill-fated ship. As it set off in the dark, the captain was cheered on by his passengers to put his money where his mouth was and to try and beat the king to England. As the White Ship's sails unfurled, it caught a gust of wind, and for a second there was jubilation on the deck as they soared to their demise. A great screeching sound, as though the sky had torn open, turned their cries of joy into ones of terror, as they realized that the White Ship had hit a rock, shrouded in the channel's darkness, and was rapidly sinking. William was hurriedly rushed to a lifeboat, but as he sailed to the shore, he heard a scream, the scream of his half-sister, Matilda. As he turned back the boat, frantically scanning the void black waters for her, the hundreds drowning around him tried to clamber onto his boat, their only hope of survival. Under the weight of those fated already to die, he was dragged down into the cold depths of death. In this timeline, while the death of William does start a succession crisis, the death of Stephen of Blois avoids the anarchy, as there are few other options for heir than Matilda. In 1122, she travelled to England to have the nobles reaffirm their oaths to her and her son, the future Henry II. In 1125, Emperor Henry V dies, and Matilda stays in Germany to support her son's bid for the imperial throne. The other options are Frederick, Duke of Swabia, and Lothair, Duke of Saxony. Frederick's arrogance over what he saw as his assured election victory against a child and an aging Lothair, and his refusal to allow free elections of the HRE's princes, ruled him out early. Lothair, meanwhile, was over 50 years of age and had no male heirs, hardly making him an ideal candidate for the throne. Though Henry was only 7, he had the benefit of having Matilda watch over him, alongside a council of regents. In a bid to convince Lothair to give his support to Henry, Matilda arranges a betrothal between his heir Gertrude and Henry. Lothair withdraws from the election, and the German princes, seeing a chance to break away from years of Salic oppression, agree to elect the boy as Emperor Henry VI at the age of 7, with Matilda acting as his regent alongside a council of regents. With the election done, Matilda is married to Geoffrey, Count of Anjou, in a bid to protect the English-controlled Duchy of Normandy. A low-intensity war with France would erupt anyways, with the death of Charles of Flanders. France and England had been undermining each other, with Louis VII trying to win back influence in Normandy and Henry trying to protect his ancestral duchy. Flanders bordered Normandy and the HRE on either side, and so was strategically important to both sides. France would be unable to defend itself from both England and the HRE, and the county would fall to the English, with Thierry of Alsace being placed as a puppet ruler in 1127. In 1135, Henry I of England would die, leading to Henry VI ruling the empire in England under personal unions, as Emperor Henry VI and King Henry II. At the age of 16 now, Henry would be able to rule in his own right, but he would keep his mother in his court as a useful and experienced advisor. He would be married to Gertrude, with her giving birth to his first son, Henry, soon after. Henry VI had the ruthlessness of his father, and showed signs in his youth that he would be an able ruler. He was equally interested in the study of warfare as he was in judicial affairs as a young man, qualities needed if he was to hold together his sprawling empire. With his wealth from the lands inherited from his father and wife, the regions of northern Italy under imperial control, and his domain in England, he would have more than enough resources to keep English nobles fearful of being absorbed into the empire under control. Seeking to prove to potentially rebellious vassals that he would not be a ruler to be trifled with, Henry would make Sicily the target of his first conquest. After being crowned as King of England, he would march down to Rome to be officially crowned as Emperor of the HRE, ending his regency before continuing down into southern Italy, successfully conquering it by 1136. However, Henry's success would be overshadowed by the death of his wife Gertrude in childbirth a few years later. Emboldened by his success in isolating France, Henry would spit in the face of Louis by marrying Eleanor of Aquitaine. Due to them both technically being subjects of Louis, the French king would be furious about being blindsided by the marriage, further angered by almost a third of France now going to his rival. Louis knew that outright war with the Anglo-German Empire would be unwinnable, and so he would turn to covertly supporting Henry's enemies. Henry would also realize that war with France would be too costly and embolden ambitious lords in his domains to rebel, and so he too would grow his influence in France covertly. As such, the Capet-Serlian Wars would begin in 1148 with the death of Duke Conan III of Brittany, starting a civil war in the duchy. Henry claimed the region through his grandfather, Henry I, but did not want to start a war over it with France, so instead he supported the claim of Conan IV. As payment over his support, Henry would annex Nantes to his lands in Normandy, and Conan, dependent on Henry for support, would be unable to contest this. After this, Henry would push his wife Eleanor's claims to Toulouse, which was de jure part of the Duchy of Aquitaine. The two rulers would try to outmaneuver each other politically, with Henry allying with Barcelona to surround the county, and Louis marrying his sister to the Count of Toulouse. Henry would invade Toulouse, but when his armies reached the gates of the city, he would find Louis inside, visiting the Count. With Louis being his feudal lord, Henry did not want to provide any justification for his own vassals to attack him, and so he would be forced to back down. Louis had won the standoff. Matilda would pass shortly after this, and without his mother there to advise him, Henry would push Louis too far. Angered at the embarrassment at Toulouse, Henry would begin the process of annexing Brittany. He forced Duke Conan to abdicate, handing over the duchy to one of Henry's sons, Geoffrey. He followed this by taking the county of Auvergne for Eleanor. The goal of this was to get Louis to attack first, after which Henry would freely wage war without being accused of starting war against his liege lord. In the middle of this, Henry would gain the Pope's blessing to invade Ireland and establish the Catholic Church there, which Henry would successfully do in 1171. Louis, meanwhile, was forming a formidable alliance, which would include the Welsh, Scots, and Bretons. The strongest of these allies, though, would be Henry's own family, his son Henry by Gertrude, and Richard and Geoffrey from Eleanor. all of whom wanted their inheritance early. Henry would even imprison Eleanor after his spies discovered she planned to join the rebels. The long-awaited war between Henry and Louis would finally erupt in 1173, with various opportunistic rebels from within Henry's domain rebelling as well. With a combination of strange luck, Henry's enemies being too far apart to aid each other, and his immense wealth, Henry would easily win the revolt of 1173. As a result of this, he would reconcile with his sons, giving them various lands across his domains to placate them. With the eldest son Henry dying in the war, Richard would be named as Henry's heir. He would be less lenient with the rest of his enemies. Wales and Scotland would both be occupied and integrated into the English crown earlier than in our timeline. Henry and his ancestors would be able to do this as he had far more resources to occupy both nations indefinitely. Eleanor would remain Duchess of Aquitaine in name only, with the region being integrated to Brittany and Normandy. Meanwhile, Louis would be forced to give Henry to Lou. The most powerful European power since Charlemagne, Henry's growth of the empire to include southern Italy and his inheritance of the English throne would grant more respect to the title Emperor of the Romans. While England would initially be governed separately, Henry's promotion of new men, minor nobles dependent on him for their power, would mean that he would slowly begin integrating the legal systems of his various domains. To avoid rebellion, the imperial throne would remain elective, and England would stay in his family, though not in the empire. Richard would be elected as Emperor Richard of the HRE and the King of England, while his brother John would become Duke of Tuscany. The empire, centralized under Henry, would slowly integrate the English crown lands into it over time, and chip away at the power of the kings of France. What do you think this empire would do next? Benefiting from Henry's reforms, would it survive well into the 12th century? Would John of England still be forced to sign the Magna Carta? Would the Crusades succeed in the direction of a more centralized Western Europe? Let me know if you would like to see a continuation of this timeline, or if there are any other scenarios you would like to see.